Hey there, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and I'm headed up to Hershey, Pennsylvania for the Hershey Comic Book Con. Now, this is a little con that I've never been to before, but they've got quite the number of artists there, some pretty big names in the comic book industry, some of which I want to get some autographs from. Specifically, I want to get some books signed by Jim Shooter, and there are a few other artists there that I think I want to add to my big Marvel coffee table book that I've been working on for the last 30 some years. So we're going to go up there. We'll see what this is like. I'm only going to be able to go up there on Sunday afternoon here. And it's even though it's a 2-day con, I do work on Saturdays. So I missed the first full day. I'm running up here Sunday morning and hopefully to have a few hours to get a few autographs and go looking for a few comic books. You never know how much time I'm going to have left after this point. But sit back, enjoy some of the footage that I take from the show. Hopefully I'll be able to take some. And I'll be right back and I'll show off everything I get signed and as well as any books that I might pick up. So stay tuned and I'll be right back. All right, everybody, I just finished up at the Hershey Comic Book Con, and I had a great time. It was an interesting con. It had some really big-name comic book creators like Mark Waid and Jim Shooter there. You had a handful of other pretty well-known artists as well. You had a lot of self-published comic book creators there, artists. You had writers who are doing their own novels, some of which were mostly fantasy. There were some things that were a little bit different. I got a chance to talk to a lot of different people while I was there, and you probably saw a interesting mix of things during the footage that I just showed you. And yeah, it was a kind of a cool show. But the thing that made it kind of interesting and maybe a little difficult was it was held at a Holiday Inn Express. And normally these hotel shows, they have a big ballroom that may outgrow that space and go out into the hallway maybe. But not this. This is actually, they had a small ballroom that went two different directions off the lobby, and it was a giant U shape, and they had at least two different ballrooms, and things were lined up in the hallways. It was a little difficult to realize how big it really was because you're kind of cramped into these small hallways. And a lot of the people I talked to were saying that, yeah, people aren't really knowing to come back to this area. They go to the other area, but then they don't have enough signage to understand to come to this area. Yeah, it was an interesting show, but I got to go through several times and meet a lot of the different artists that I talked to. I actually talked to some of the writers as well. I got to meet some of my favorite comic book creators. I did get to talk to Jim Shooter, and I've got some books signed by him that I'm going to show off when I get home. But yeah, it was a fun little show, and I ended up picking up some interesting things. They did have a handful of comic book dealers there that were, some of which were basically based off of the Baltimore area, and I see them at the local shows down in Maryland all the time. But I really didn't get into the back issues. There was a few things that I saw that I was interested in, but nothing jumped out at me necessarily. But I did manage to pick up some comic books today. But what I'll do is I'll get home and I'll show off all the books I got signed and everything else that I picked up from the show. So stay tuned. Let me get home and I'll be right back.
Many unbearable hours later.
All right, everybody. So I finally made it home after going to the Hershey Comic Con. As you can tell, I am not in my normal location, which means I'm down in West Virginia right now at my other home. And I immediately left the con at Hershey, and several hours later, here I am down in West Virginia, and I had a safe trip coming down, got down here safe. And I wanted to show off everything that I picked up and everything I got signed at Hershey Comic Con. So like I said, on the ride down, it was an interesting con. They had some pretty big names there, some medium-sized names, and some people you've never heard of. There were writers of novels. You had plenty of other independent artists doing their own things. It was a real eclectic mix of different things, including some comic book dealers there as well. So the main reason I ended up going to the Hershey Comic Con was to get Jim Shooter. And I have got a bunch of books that I'm working on that have a lot of different creators on there. And Jim Shooter was instrumental in all of those books. He was editor-in-chief at the time on all these books and at Marvel. And so I wanted to have him added to all of these books that I had. And even then, I still didn't get everything signed because at $20 a pop, it adds up really quick. And so I do a small batch. Every time I see Jim Shooter, I do a small batch of these project books like this. And that's what I'm going to show off at the end of the video today. It'll be the last thing I show, so you guys got to stay tuned for that. But I also took my big 50 Years of Marvel book to get signed by other artists. And it turned out that some of them ended up canceling. And the ones that were there, to be quite honest, Honestly, I didn't feel like I needed to add them to the book. So I didn't get anything else signed by any other of the Marvel artists there. And the only other autographs I picked up were from some independent artists that were there. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now. So let's just start with the first thing that I ended up picking up. So the first thing that I ended up picking up was from an independent publisher from Green Archer Comics. And normally I not really interested in too many independent things from people who are self-publishing. The quality can be iffy on some books and everything, but this caught my eye mostly because of the title on the book. And I'm going to show it to you here. I'll show you the book and we'll talk about it because I picked up the first 3 issues from the writer Alan Liska, who was writing this book, self-published from Green Archer Comics. It's called Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, and you can see that he signed it right there. And I'll show you the other 2 in just a sec. But let's talk about this for a sec. I don't know if you guys follow old-time radio or fans of that at all, but I am. I have been a lifelong fan of old-time radio. My aunt got me involved with this by buying me Adventures in Cassettes back in the mid-70s, actually probably early 70s. And I still have those cassettes today, listening to shows like Suspense and Box 13 and Abbott and Costello. There were just a million comic book shows, a million radio shows to listen to. And she got me on a lifelong journey of listening to these. These days, I listen to them on an app on the phone. Every time I travel, I listen to old-time radios. And one of my favorite shows is called Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar. And it went for a lot of years, and they had several actors who voiced that actor. But my favorite was Bob Bailey. And when I saw the books right there, and they had the logo, Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, I had to go over and find out what this was. And apparently the license for this is in public domain these days. And Alan Liska, I may be explaining this wrong, but loved the property. And through his line of work, he had a lot of experience. And what he did was he took this investigator. Johnny Dollar was an insurance investigator who would look at basically he would investigate claims against the company. And it could be death claims. It could be just filing any kind of claim. Basically, he was in the investigator. And what Alan has done here is he's turned him into America's fabulous freelance cyber insurance investigator. I guess that brings it up into modern times a little bit. And I'll say that I'm not as much of a fan of the art as I am the concept and the writing on this. This has been pretty fun, but I picked up the first 3 issues because they had a set. You could buy all 3 of them for so much. And just because of my love for old-time radio, I had to buy these just for the novelty of it more than anything, because anybody else who loves old-time radio like this, to do something like this, has got my support no matter what they do. And these are pretty cool. So I ended up buying the first 3 issues, and there you can see he signed it right there as well. But one of the things that what he did was he gave me issue number, I believe it's issue number 2. It was a variant cover right here by the artist Keith Williams. Well, Keith Williams is 2 tables down, and they gave me this so I could go get him to sign this. So I went over and got Keith Williams as well, who is also a Marvel artist. So that was pretty cool. It's not like me to pick up independent stuff like this, but I don't know, it kind of struck me. Again, I love old-time radio, and that's the connection right there. So it kind of got me started going around the room, and instead of going to the traditional artists that I've been getting autographs from years, the Marvel and DC artists and things like that, I did spend a little time with these independent illustrators. And I ended up stopping at a table with this right here. The book is called Marching Through Georgia. And it was if you look in the video, you see a little clip, and you see a little bit of this art. Actually, I've got a card right here. I had this art on it, on the banner, and it was very striking there in the hallway, in the ballroom at the hotel. And I had to spend a little time with him, so I let the illustrator, the creator, is Andrew Loader. I think this is actually a few years old at this point, because I thought I saw a copyright of 2011 in here. But I let him tell me about the story of this a little bit, and I love the artwork, at least on that illustration on the banner, so much. So I went ahead and picked that up, and he autographed that as well. And then the last independent artist that I went to was actually, I didn't get anything from him, but he was one of the variant artists on a book called, and I'm reading here, Mr. Button's Let's Hunt Monsters by Nick Davis. And I'm spending a little time with, and I apologize, I didn't catch the artist's name. And he didn't do this cover. He is one of the variant cover artists. He had some of his other books there. I did not pick up one of his original sketch covers, but he ended up telling about the concept, and I was looking at the art, and you've got this bear right here. This is Mr. Buttons, there's a whole backstory to why he looks like this. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit there so you can see it. And he's got a button for an eye, and he's kind of disheveled. And this concept of how he hunts monsters, I mean, it was interesting. It was an interesting concept. And I went ahead and picked this book up, and I said, hey, I'd give him a shout out. Maybe, I think they've got a Kickstarter for the next issue. This is kind of interesting. What was kind of cool was you see a little bear like this doing anything like this in a comic book, and the first thing I think of is Boris the Bear. And that was interesting because he said, yeah, the creator of Boris the Bear actually reached out to Nick Davis, and I basically wanted him to put a stop to the likeness. And, well, he said, well, Boris the Bear was actually a real anamorphic, I mispronounced that, by the way, bear. This is a toy stuffed animal. There is a difference here. So, kind of interesting. I'll leave a link down below for all of these things so you guys can check it out yourself. But I had fun doing this with the independent artists like this. This was pretty cool. It was kind of fun, and it was very different from what I normally do. Now, one of the other things that I did stop at was a table with one of the fiction writers with his novels there. And if you saw it as one of the first things in the clip, it's actually one of the first tables I stopped at. The writer's name is Nick DeWolf, and he had a lot of different books there. And I was looking at the books, and he asked me, hey, what are you interested in? And I said, well, I'm a comic book guy. And he says, hey, you got to check out this book. And he wrote a book called Villains Never Die. And he kind of gave me this concept, and man, it kind of blew my socks off. I'm going, I mean, parts of it sound very familiar. I've seen things a little like this in different places, but the mix and the way he was talking about it makes me want, I probably should have picked the book up right there from him, but I may end up having to get this book off of Amazon. So again, and he's somebody, I will leave a link down below as well. You can check out his books as well. That's the only recommendation I can give you, other than I love the concept. I don't know how good the books are, but I actually did go to Amazon and look up this book, and there were a lot of good reviews on it. So maybe I should have picked it up at the show. You never know. Now, one of the other things that I didn't buy anything from, but I did stop by a table with the artist. I'm going to mispronounce his name, so I apologize. Deegan, and I wrote it down right there, so that's why I'm looking over there. Pushkors? Ooh, I think I mispronounced that. But he is a comic book illustrator and cover artist with IDW. I don't know if he's done other labels or not. I know he's trying to get his work in at Marvel and DC, like most artists do. They want to be able to say they've done work with the big two like that. But he's done I think he just did his first, or he's doing several of the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle covers. So I had an interesting conversation with him. Didn't buy anything, but we talked about graphic design and art, and him getting to do his lifelong thing because he came from a similar background as I did. It's just I didn't continue down the path of being an illustrator. As much as I loved it, I found my creative outlets came in different ways with graphic design and designing brand identities and developing ad campaigns and things like that. So a little bit different, but I pushed a different way. But that's why I still love comic book guys, is because I still wish in my heart of hearts that that's what I was still doing with drawing comics and doing anything in the comics industry. It just wasn't for me, but that's still a big fan. And doing this channel is actually a creative outlet to express how much I do love this hobby. But so those were all pretty good. And I'm looking on my list here, and I did end up stopping at one table, and I picked up this. This is the only other thing that I ended up buying from the show. I'm telling you right now, I did not buy any of the back issues. I stopped by all the comic book dealers, and I went through everything, and it just nothing that really jumped out at me. I was looking for to finish up my Invaders run, and I ended up, and as I'm thinking about this, there's actually two things I picked up, but I'll do the first one here because I'm talking about it already. It was at a table with Senate Art Studio or Sonat. I'm not sure. I never knew how to pronounce Joe Sennett's name. And what at the table was, I'm only assuming his children, I don't know that for a fact, but Mark and Belinda Sennett or Sonat were there. And on the table, they artists, I guess, in their own rights, but they had prints signed by Joe right there. And I went through the portfolio, and he had several classic books that he had done the inking on. And I ended up picking up a print of Fantastic Four. Let's put it over here. Fantastic Four number 52, the first appearance of the Black Panther. And you can see it signed. I'm going to zoom in. There it is. You see it? Signed by Joe Sennett. And $10 for that print. Man, I mean, that's all. I probably should have picked up the whole batch of these things. But they had several other issues that were not, they didn't scream Joe Sennett artwork as much as this run on Fantastic Four right there. So I did pick that up right there. I thought that was pretty cool. And I did pick up one other print, and I realized that it's sitting over there on the table. So I'm going to put the video on pause, and I'm going to go pick that up, and I want to show you what I picked up, because it's also a pretty big print. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
5 minutes later.
All right, guys, I'm back, and I've got the last print right here. They rolled it up for me, and I forgot to get it out and show you. But I had to pick this up when I saw this there, and honestly, I think it was a really good deal. Let me show you what this is. Let me unroll this right here. And it's going to take up the whole screen, guys. But check out this right here. I'm going to have to get it framed, but check that out. It is this Captain America lithograph from Jim Steranko. Boy, I can't even get it in the camera. It's so big. But it is also signed by Jim Steranko. And can you see it? Can you see it right there? Yeah, it's already signed in pencil, so I got to be careful with this. But this right here, this print, was a benefit for the 9/11 Memorial Fund. And I remember seeing this print when it came out. I'm going, oh my God, it's some beautiful Steranko Captain America artwork. And I saw that they had a couple prints there. Again, I probably should have picked up, I think they had 3 prints on the table. I should have picked up all 3 of those. That is such a nice print. That was probably my favorite thing that I picked up at the show, to be quite honest. I mean, that Joe Sennett Fantastic Four is fantastic, but getting that Jim Steranko, I mean, you go to a show, I know he was just down at Heroes Con, and you're talking $50 an autograph, and I paid a little bit more for that print. I mean, honestly, that print right there, these prints run $125, $130, $135 for a signed print, because it was a limited run signed by him. It's hard to read, but I want to say they did 2,500 of these. It's a little hard to read down there. I'll definitely have to check out some listings, because I know some of them are in eBay. I may check out and see what the print run was on that, but they're numbered. It was, I think what did I get? Number 215, 217 of 25 or 2,800. It's a little hard to read. But that right there, I can't wait to get that framed. That is really nice. It's a beautiful Jim Steranko piece again. But that was everything that I ended up buying, other than getting autographs from Jim Shooter, and that's what we're here for. So let me get the comics right here, and I will show you what I got, what I ended up getting signed by Jim Shooter. And again, all of these are jam pieces where I've got multiple creators on them. So let's just go through them one by one. We got Marvel and DC present the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans. This great Darkseid or it's a Dark Side. I always say Darkseid. Darkseid and Dark Phoenix. And you've got Jim Shooter at his signature right there. Right above him is Chris Claremont. Over here is Louise Simonson, who was the editor on this before she married Walt. It was still Louise Jones at that point. And of course, the cover and all the interior art is done by Walt Simonson. And it's a little hard to pick up, but his signature is right there. But guys, this is what a fantastic piece of artwork. When Jim was signing this, he was going, this was one of his most favorite books he ever had something to do with right here. I mean, the talent on this book right here is fantastic. But so are the rest of these. So I started this years ago as a project piece. It's from some of my favorite Avengers books. And you guys know I am a huge fan of the Avengers with John Buscema and Tom Palmer. Well, at the very end of that original run with the two of them, we had the Kree-Skrull War. And John had left by that point. Sal had done a couple issues, and then Neil Adams came on the Avengers. And those were some great books. But that whole run with the Kree-Skrull War was Sal Buscema, Neil Adams, John Buscema at the very end, and most of it, not everything, was Tom Palmer was doing inking. And they did a reprint and a two-issue reprint of that a few years ago, a number of years ago. Actually, hang on, I'll tell you, a few years ago, 1983, just a few years ago, guys. And they've got two issues, 1 and 2. And 1 has got a new cover, a cover by Walt Simonson. So that is his contribution. And he did there is a little bit of a wrap up because they don't reprint the Sal Buscema issues here. So they do a quick catch up with a few pages from Walt Simonson artwork there in the beginning. But then it starts reprinting from the Neil Adams issues through the John Buscema issue in number 97. Well, so on this, what did I get signed? There's Jim Shooter right there in the middle. There's Walt Simonson down there. I got Tom Palmer right there. And up here, you've got who wrote it. It's a little hard to see. Let's see if I can catch the light. Roy Thomas, and right above him is Neil Adams. So that right there, man, I love that piece. It's a shame that they didn't reprint any parts of the Sal Buscema. Sal is still with us. I would love to have gotten him to sign this too, but technically he's not on these reprints at all. But issue number 2, you've got Tom Palmer actually did the inking on the front. Who did the? Bob Banansky, I believe, did the penciling on the cover, but it is Tom Palmer inking on there. So what I've got on here is I do have Roy Thomas right there. Jim Shooter did sign right there in silver. Neil Adams right up at the top. And then Tom Palmer is down there, right there at the bottom. So those are pretty cool. And these aren't books I'm going to get CGC'd at necessarily, but they're kind of cool. I love having these in the PC. And then I went over to another favorite of mine, and it was that run of Black Widow, the storyline from Ralph Macchio and George Perez on Marvel Fanfare. And you've got George Perez on a lot of the covers. I'm not sure. I only have 3 of the issues that I was working on. And I've got issue number 10 right here. And it is a tough cover to actually see the autographs. But let's go through it real quick. Up there at the top, the editor on Marvel Fanfare was Al Milgrom. And he does have some little funny little stories that he puts in at the beginning as the editor. There's Jim Shooter, who just added his today. You've got, I'm covering up right there. My hand is covering up George Perez. There's Ralph Macchio. He did his in gold because he felt like that might pop out a little bit more. And Brett Breeding was doing the inking for George Perez on that in here. So that is really cool. This is a book that I actually need to get a couple more people. Let's see. I need to get Brent Anderson, who did a pinup section in the back. And then on the back cover, you've got who is it? It's B. Craig Russell did the artwork right here on the back. So I still need a couple more creators to finish this up, but that's a really good, wow, I love it. It's one of my favorite George Perez illustrations right there. And then we continue with issue number 12, and this is actually the key because this is the first appearance of the Iron Maiden, which I guess made her MCU appearance in the Black Widow film. But this issue right here, still very busy. I love the busy George Perez artwork. When they got all these details, it is always the best George Perez work. But what do we got here? We've got Al Milgrom again up here at the top. Got Ralph Macchio right there, who wrote the Black Widow story. There's George Perez's autograph right there. Jim Shooter added his just earlier today right there. And then down here at the bottom, who is that? Yeah. It's sorry, I forgot which one it was. It's a little hard to see, but that's Rick Leonardi. And Rick Leonardi did the pinup section in this book. And then actually the back cover, you got Al Milgrom as Captain America. He did that illustration himself right there. So, a cool book. Actually in pretty good shape. I took them out of the bags and boards that I ended up taking to the show. My bags and boards were blue taped windows with windows where they could sign, and for this presentation, so I can show you guys, I took them all out of the bags and board so you could see them a little bit better. But I did get the last one of that storyline, issue number 13, and this one's really good because you've got Snapdragon there, cover by Art Adams, and you can see he signed that last year at Baltimore Comic-Con right there. A little hard to see, but you can see in the reflection right there, George Perez's autograph. Al Milgrom is right above him. You got Ralph Macchio, again, the writer on the Black Widow story right there. Right here on my finger, you can see it. That's Charles Vess. And Charles Vess did, and I'll show it to you, did the Warrior 3 story that's in this book. And then Jim Shooter added his today right there. And it's a little hard to see again. Let's see if we can get the light. It's a little hard to see right there. Brett Breeding did the inking on that story for Black Widow, and his signature's up there. And let's see. There's a story by Charles Vess artwork. Who did the writing on that? Yeah, I don't know who. I don't recognize the name for that. But yeah, that's pretty cool right there. I actually own a couple of pages of original artwork from this series. In fact, I own one of the pages from this issue. I don't know if both of them come from this issue. Let me see. Look real fast. Yeah, actually, I think. Yeah, both pages I own actually come from this issue right here. So this story right here, I own 2 of those pages. All right, guys, so we're wrapping it up. The last thing I got for Jim Shooter and the last thing I've got for you today, I've been working on this just as a fun piece, a Wolverine #1 limited series facsimile reprint. This is actually the one from, it's not the one that just came out this last year. This one actually came from 2020. And I've been working on it for fun. If I ever get to meet Frank Miller again, I will definitely get him to sign this. But we've got Jim Shooter, who editor-in-chief. You've got Louise Simonson, who was the editor. Believe it or not, nobody talks about her being the editor on here. You've got Joe Rubinstein right up here. It's a little hard to see, and that gold did not throw ink very well. And right above that is Chris Claremont. Both of those, all of these I got, except for the Jim Shooter, last year at either HeroesCon or Baltimore Comic Con. I think I added all of them. It was definitely all last year, except for Jim Shooter, who I just got today. But guys, that is it. I had fun at this con. I will consider going back if there's other artists next year that I definitely want to add to my collection. I wasn't I definitely wouldn't go just for the comic books because there wasn't a lot of comic book dealers there, but there were a few that had some interesting things. It just wasn't enough for me to actually, there wasn't anything I really was jumping out at me. So I don't want to poo-poo on the dealers, but it was a fun little con, and I spent a few hours there, and then I hopped in the car and headed down 81, and I finally got here to my house in West Virginia. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you for joining me. Definitely leave me a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about all the things that I picked up today. What was your favorite thing that I got signed? What was your favorite book that I might have picked up? And definitely give the independent creators a chance by checking out their websites or Facebook pages, whatever link I've leave down in the description below. Just give them a chance. That's all I ask. And if you guys enjoy this kind of content, definitely hit the like, slap the subscribe, and click on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the episodes that I put out each and every week, Mondays and Fridays at 10 a.m. All right, guys, y'all have a great day. I had a great time today. I will see you for the next show. Just remember, every comic has a story.